I want you to picture something, something you've almost certainly seen online this week. Think about the CEO or, the startup founder who posts that professionally shot, moody black and white photo of themselves on LinkedIn.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. The one where they look incredibly distressed.
Yes, exactly. And it's always accompanied by this 4-paragraph essay about how they just had to lay off like 100 people.
Right, right.
And the whole post is engineered to look like this display of agonizing vulnerability. But, I mean, underneath it all, it's just this glaringly obvious monument to their own empathy.
It's the ultimate humble brag.
It really is. And, we scroll past these posts, we roll our eyes, and we think to ourselves that the internet and algorithms have just completely broken the human ego. We assume this desperate thirst for validation is a uniquely 21st century disease.
Well, it's incredibly tempting to blame Silicon Valley for the mechanics of human vanity, isn't it? I mean, it gives us a convenient scapegoat. If the algorithm is the problem, then human nature is off the hook.
But human nature is definitely not off the hook. And today, we are doing a deep dive into a stack of historical sources that prove this agonizing thirst for applause is basically a psychological antique.
It really is.
We're looking at a fascinating collection of conduct and etiquette manuals spanning centuries, from the 1704 accomplished female instructor through to the 1833 Gentleman and Ladies Book of Politeness.
Some really incredible texts in there.
Absolutely. But to truly understand the DNA of the humble brag, our mission today is to focus intensely on one specific, shockingly perceptive French text from 1810. It's called L'homme de bonne compagnie, or the man of good company.
And when we hear 1810 etiquette manual, we have a very specific expectation in mind. We imagine these rigid chapters dictating exactly how low to bow to a visiting duke.
Or like the mathematically correct way to hold a teacup.
Exactly, but if we zero in on the fifth part of this manual, specifically pages 251 through 318, the author just completely abandons the table manners.
Which is so refreshing.
It is. Instead, we get this absolute masterclass on social psychology. I mean, it reads like a surgical dissection of the human ego, exploring the hidden dangers of boasting, the toxic mechanics of jealousy, and, well, the weaponization of flattery.
To really appreciate how cutting this text is, we have to look at the stage the author is writing for. I mean, think about France in 1810. You're deep into the Napoleonic era.
Right. The social landscape was a mess.
A total mess. The French Revolution had recently upended the entire social order. You have these old-blood aristocrats who survived the guillotine mixing in drawing rooms with Napoleon's newly minted military nobility.
Yeah, so social status was no longer just something you were born into. It was highly fluid, highly contested, and incredibly anxious.
And that anxiety is basically the engine of the entire book.
It really is. In an environment where the social hierarchy is unstable, the only currency that matters is perception. And the text tackles this right in its first section, identifying what it calls the thirst for praise.
The thirst for praise. That's such a modern-sounding phrase.
Isn't it? And the author points out that this intense, agonizing desire for reputation is actually a distinct weakness of the great.
Wait, really a weakness of the great?
Yeah, people who already possess wealth, power, or military status are often the most paralyzed by this thirst. They engage in exhausting affectation and all this political maneuvering just to secure the esteem of the room.
Because their status feels fragile, unless it's constantly being validated by others.
Precisely.
It's the ultimate paradox of power. When you've conquered everything else, the only territory left to hoard is the real estate inside other people's heads.
That's a great way to put it.
But because these high-status individuals are so thirsty for this validation, they get impatient. Right. They simply can't tolerate waiting for someone else to notice how brilliant or virtuous they are.
So they just take matters into their own hands.
Exactly. They start supplying the praise themselves. The text refers to these people as the fanfarons, the boasters. And the manual describes this act of self-praise with one of the most evocative metaphors I've ever come across. It calls it le saut périlleux.
The perilous leap.
The perilous leap. I read that phrase, and my mind instantly went to a gymnast throwing themselves into a massive twisting backflip.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy. Because it captures the sheer physical risk of boasting.
Right.
When you brag, you are launching yourself into the social atmosphere.
Right.
You're demanding the room's absolute attention, and you're entirely dependent on the audience catching you with their applause or their agreement.
And if they do, the audience gasps and cheers and you stick the landing. But if you leap into the air with the boast and the room just goes completely silent, or worse, people subtly avert their eyes, You just hit the mat face first. But let me challenge the text on this for a second.
Sure.
Is this 1810 manual suggesting that we have to sit in absolute monastic silence about our own skills?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're trying to establish credibility with a new business partner or going into a high-stakes interview, you have to advocate for yourself.
Oh, absolutely. And the author is actually highly pragmatic about this.
Okay, good.
The text emphasizes the utility of restraint rather than, absolute invisibility. It's about understanding the mechanics of the leap. The manual warns against the uncalculated leap driven purely by pride.
Right, so jumping without looking.
Exactly. The proud person leaps because their ego demands to fly, and they completely fail to assess whether the room is actually willing to catch them. Restraint is the psychological wisdom to know when your accomplishments have enough gravity to speak for themselves.
And knowing when forcing the issue will just actively alienate the people around you. Which brings us to the most uncomfortable question of all.
Okay, let's hear it.
When we see someone take that perilous leap, when the founder posts that crying selfie or the boaster drops a massive name drop at a dinner party, why is our immediate visceral instinct to step back and let them fall?
Well, because the boaster fundamentally misreads the room. They assume the audience is this neutral observer just waiting to be impressed. But the text seamlessly moves into explaining that human society is already saturated with intense, simmering jealousy.
Jealousy and rivalry, right?
Yes. The moment you elevate yourself with a boast, you're accidentally holding up a mirror to the audience, reminding everyone else of their own inadequacies.
Wow. So you're turning your success into their failure.
Exactly. And the author breaks down this jealousy with some fascinating, albeit highly gendered observations that really reflect those high-stakes 1810 drawing rooms.
Right, the text discusses the specific vanity of women regarding their social rivals, analyzing how influence was fiercely guarded in spheres where women wielded soft power.
Yeah. But then the text pivots to the jealousy of men over the professional or status success of other men, and it uses a terrifying phrase.
What's the phrase?
It says this male jealousy is driven by a deep, almost primal desire to erase their competitors.
Erase. That is heavy.
Erasing a rival is vastly different from merely defeating them. Defeat acknowledges that the opponent was worthy of the fight. To erase someone is a zero-sum mentality where another person's success is viewed as an existential threat to your own main character narrative.
I have to be the only one on stage.
Exactly. If I'm to be perceived as the singular great man of the room, your achievements can't simply be lesser. They must be treated as if they do not exist.
And because this desperation to be superior is so intense, people start inventing reasons to feel superior when they lack any actual merit.
Oh, yeah. The mental gymnastics are incredible.
The text outlines these bizarre vanities people use to fuel their ego. It specifically calls out the pride of birth and the exhausting habit of constantly citing one's ancestors.
The author labels this the creation of chimerical or imaginary greatness.
Chimerical greatness.
Right, and this was highly relevant in an era where impoverished old nobles were trying to pull rank on wealthy new generals. By clinging to chimerical greatness, a person achieves a phenomenal state of being important without importance.
Important without importance. I love that phrase. You act like you own the building, but you don't even have a key to the front door.
Exactly. And the manual notes that this imaginary greatness always leads to extreme impertinence, because if your importance is real, it speaks for itself.
But if your importance is a chimera, a fantasy, you have to be loud, rude, and impertinent to constantly force the world to acknowledge the illusion.
That mechanism is exactly what makes vanity so fascinating. And the author exposes this brilliant contradiction in the 7th section of this part that proves vanity is entirely disconnected from actual morality.
This was my favorite part. The text critiques libertines, those taking vanity in their wild debauches, bragging about breaking every social rule. But in the next breath, it fiercely critiques people who take vanity in their extreme restraint and prudishness.
It calls them all out.
So people will literally brag about going completely off the rails, and they'll brag about staying perfectly on the tracks. It's like the Olympics of extremes.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what the sport is, as long as you get the gold medal. The libertine wants to be seen as the most untamed, and the prude wants to be seen as the most disciplined. They just refuse to be average, because they are both taking the same perilous leap, just launching from different platforms. Vanity, the text reveals, is not about the behavior itself. It's about the deep-seated psychological desire to be perceived as exceptional. It's the utilization of diverse ways of praising oneself.
So if self-praise is this perilous leap that triggers the room's desire to erase you, the natural human reflex is to just run in the opposite direction.
Right.
To stay safe, we assume we should just praise everyone else.
Which is a huge mistake.
Yeah, doing that creates an entirely new trap. The 1810 text says the absolute worst thing you can become is an eternal praiser.
The manual shifts into this profound exploration of the delicate art of praising. It stresses that offering genuine praise is incredibly difficult. You literally have to overcome your own base jealousy to acknowledge someone else's merit.
Which takes real character.
It does. But the eternal praiser takes the cowardly way out. This is the person who constantly and indiscriminately showers everyone with compliments to avoid conflict and buy cheap affection.
We all know an eternal praiser. It's the person who tells you your mediocre presentation was life-changing, or that your new shoes are visionary.
Yes, everything is amazing.
It reminds me of a building inspector who is so afraid of giving bad news that they just pass every single crumbling, structurally unsound house they look at.
That is a brilliant analogy.
Right. At first, the homeowners love them. But eventually, when roofs start caving in, that inspector's stamp of approval goes from being a compliment to being an active warning sign. If you hand out silly, false praise constantly, your compliments lose all their social currency.
It's just hyperinflation. To contrast this, the text actually provides historical case studies to illustrate what the true art of praising looks like. It specifically cites a beautiful trait of Muhammad II as the historical gold standard.
Now wait, Muhammad II, the Ottoman Sultan who conquered Constantinople, he's not exactly a guy known for his gentle drawing room etiquette.
No, definitely not.
So why use him as the model for praise?
Because Muhammad II possessed absolute power, meaning he never actually had to praise anyone. Yet, historically, he was known for his profound ability to recognize genuine merit, even in his enemies, or in artists from rival nations. The text uses his example to demonstrate that true praise must be an act of objective justice, not an act of manipulation. When a ruler with absolute power pauses to specifically and accurately recognize a real quality in someone else without exaggerating it, that praise elevates the recipient while remaining totally grounded in reality.
It's measured, it's earned, and therefore it's immensely valuable. Which brings us to the darkest, most cautionary part of this entire deep dive.
Yeah, this is where it gets a little scary.
This is where the 1810 text reads less like a psychology manual and more like a political survival guide. It explores what happens when praise devolves from a social courtesy into an actual weapon of seduction.
The final sections of Part 5 deal heavily with the flatterers of princes and the sheer pettiness of certain praisers. And the author invokes the ancient wisdom of Pythagoras here to caution against the extreme dangers of this dynamic.
What did Pythagoras say?
Pythagoras famously warned his disciples that it is far better to be criticized by an enemy than praised by a friend, and he basically equated flatterers with treacherous traps for the soul. The 1810 manual takes this ancient warning and applies it to the concept of louanges, insidious's insidious praise.
Insidious praise. That phrase just carries so much venom. And the text explicitly warns that this specific type of praise causes actual psychological blindness in the person receiving it.
Literal blindness to their own flaws.
Let's ground this in a modern scenario, because this is the exact dynamic that destroys modern companies. Think about a highly successful CEO who starts surrounding themselves exclusively with yes men. How does the insidious praise actually blind them?
Well, we have to look at the psychological mechanism of flattery. When that CEO receives insidious praise, it weaponizes that thirst for reputation we discussed at the very beginning. The flatterer tells the leader exactly what their ego desperately wants to hear, that their chimerical greatness is real, that their flawed strategy is actually genius. This triggers a massive dopamine hit. Over time, the leader's brain begins to crave that friction-free validation.
So the brain actually starts rewiring itself to protect the ego.
Exactly. The leader begins to filter out dissenting voices, critical data, or harsh realities because those things cause cognitive friction. They threaten the high. The flatterer doesn't physically force a blindfold onto the prince or the CEO. They merely create an incredibly comfortable illusion.
So the blindness is a collaborative delusion.
Yes, the victim willingly shuts their own eyes because the darkness of the echo chamber is so incredibly flattering.
That is a terrifying concept. It's a transaction where you trade your actual grip on reality for a steady drip of pure ego. Tell me my bad ideas are brilliant and I will give you proximity to my power.
It happens every day.
So, if we are surrounded by fanfarons taking perilous leaps and eternal praisers handing out worthless currency and insidious flatterers trying to blind us, what is the cure? How does the author tell us to survive this?
The author synthesizes the final lesson with a demand for rigorous, almost uncomfortable self-awareness. To fight the blindness of flattery, the text says we must rely on strict observations on real qualities.
Real qualities, meaning we have to strip away the narrative and look at the cold, hard data of who we actually are.
We must ground ourselves entirely in truth. We have to actively reject the seductive comfort of false praise, and we must evaluate ourselves and our peers based purely on tangible actions, genuine virtues, and real merit. We basically have to become impervious to the chimera.
We started this deep dive looking at a crying CEO on LinkedIn, assuming that the internet had somehow invented the vanity spiral. But navigating this incredible 1810 French manual proves that the tools of social maneuvering haven't changed a single bit.
Not at all.
The desperate thirst for validation, the dangerous gymnastics of boasting, the bizarre vanities we invent when we lack real importance, and the blinding danger of the yes man. These are fundamental, deeply rooted human conditions. The stage has shifted from the velvet drawing rooms of 19th century Paris to the glowing screens in our pockets, but the script is identical. We're all still just trying to figure out how to be seen and how to survive the way others look at us.
The human ego is remarkably consistent across the centuries, And examining these historical mechanisms raises one final, vital question for us to consider as we navigate our own social spheres.
Where does all of this leave us?
Well, think about it. If insidious praise causes literal blindness to our real qualities, and if praising ourselves is a perilous leap that almost always triggers the destructive jealousy of others, is it possible that the only truly safe compliment, the only one that remains entirely pure, is the one we give silently? Yeah. A genuine, objective acknowledgement of someone's real qualities kept entirely locked in the privacy of our own minds, where neither our own vanity nor the poison of flattery can ever reach it to corrupt it.
A silent compliment. You watch the boaster take the perilous leap, you observe the reality of the room, and you just smile to yourself knowing the truth. Keep that quiet power in mind the next time you feel the urge to launch yourself into the air.